Fatherhood.
Yes, it
It's a big
is.
one.
It is a big one. Yeah, when we were talking before, what you were saying around like the shifts that came for you when you first had your son compared to like where you're at now, and then when you had your second child and how that transition was.
Yeah, I remember, wow, just feeling so out of my league, so overwhelmed, and just clueless as far as what to do in some of these moments when the nervous systems are through the roof, and there doesn't seem to be a solution to the chaos and the intensity, and just nobody really warns you about these moments. Like, I don't know if
Nope.
we would actually have children if somebody really informed us like how intense these moments get. But
Mm.
when I look back, I'm so incredibly grateful, like in a weird way, because what fatherhood does, especially in these moments, and stretching us in all the ways, is it forces us to do our work. And as a single man, free as a bird with no responsibilities, you don't necessarily have the same, I'll call it, opportunity to
You
do
do
that
not.
immense work, which is what propels us and expands us in every direction,
Mm.
and really gives us that opportunity to rise into a greater version of ourselves. And so, yeah, I mean, there gradually is a progression from those extremely difficult moments into a place where I am now, where my son is 5 and my daughter is 3, where it feels like I've accessed equanimity, and it's a miracle to even say that. Where in these moments, I don't necessarily get moved or shaken so much anymore. I can just hold it,
Right.
and it doesn't trigger me as much, nearly as much as it used to. So grateful for that. I mean, it's just something recently that I kind of acknowledged, and soon enough, you wake up and you realize like, wow, I've grown immensely. So, yeah, and that really just equips you for life in general. I mean,
Mm.
like in traffic or with business dealings or anything else that potentially could be extremely,
Your partner.
yeah, your relationship. I mean, there's just so many things throughout life that could potentially throw you off. And if you have this equanimity, this strength to hold the field and not fall apart, then it's like a superpower.
Yeah, no, I mean very similarly the unknown reality of everything that encompasses being a father hits you like a smack when they're born. And in my case, it was very much coming from a place of an emergency situation in birth, which then rattled me enough. But then the constant like upping of him going into NICU instead of being with us during birth, and then even once we got him home and we're like, okay, finally he's here, we're doing this, and now he's safe and he's healthy. It just drastically switches everything in the way that you relate. And so much of that beginning part was with him struggling and not really fully understanding what was necessarily at the time what we would have considered wrong with him. That was very ungrounding. And now, in a very flip polar opposite of that, it's so much easier to sit with him and knowing what you know after you go through the whole process. I can only imagine that a second time around now doesn't feel so daunting. And the first time never did, but the mistake in that was that I thought that I knew how easy it was going to be, and it was not.
What
It's
was it that wasn't easy for you in those moments?
between the mix of miscommunication between my partner and I on what was expected, what we needed to do, my own self sacrificing tendencies to overgive and not do enough for me, and then feel stressed and overwhelmed and didn't have time for work, didn't have time for self. All of that, trying to find a balance in there was very challenging, and very grateful that my partner is who she is and allowed like those moments to come up. And then, but it very much took her having to come in at me in those moments and be like, this needs to change, it's not working, and like you just like when you need this, ask for it. That was great. And the other huge like factor was him crying, which initially, because of my and society's tendencies to not enjoy crying and find it to be a highly negative thing, it viscerally affected me. And so then when I had to put myself in the positions that we then did, where we actually went to listen to him crying instead of just trying to shush him, it was very hard internally on my entire nervous system. And so I hit points that I didn't think I'd hit and realized, oh, sometimes even though this is my child and I think I would give them everything in the world and do anything for them, and at this point still would, there's the other part of your brain that's just like, make this stop. And
It's real.
yeah, and it's hard to recognize that that still exists within the duality of you still fully loving them. Just crazy.
I know exactly what you're talking about. I remember those moments. And it's something about that age earlier on when it's like they rely on that as a communication tool and they don't really know
It's
how to
the only one.
communicate anything, but just like there's a need and you gotta fucking figure it out.
Communicate or even just express. They can't talk, they can't
Yeah.
move and yell and rage.
Like they're obviously feeling. They're such open, sensitive beings at that age. They're feeling everything in the environment, and of course, they have their own emotions and needs, and um, but yeah, I found it really interesting when you said that you would just hold and you would just listen and you would explain to me this process of what your intention was in these moments.
So yeah, this came out of the necessity of him crying 8 to 10 hours a day, and yeah, which was a lot, and shook both my partner and I to the point that we were, well, she especially was just researching and trying to find anything possible to fix this, which we tried pretty much every alternative modality and had to do hospital visits and make sure that everything was physically okay with him, and he was fine. Chiropractor sessions did nothing, osteopath did nothing, acupuncture, homeopathic medicine, pretty much any other
Because you
modality we
assumed there was
tried.
something wrong with
Yeah,
it.
as you anyone would, because why does somebody cry for 8 to 10 hours a day if something is not physically wrong in their body? 5.5 months in, about, when my partner came across a method of parenting called aware parenting, which was created a while back, she started explaining the entire process to me, and mentally I could understand it from a logical perspective of, okay, maybe I can see how this would work, but I didn't fully, like, physically, like, feel or really deeply understand it. So we gave it a go, and she was the first one to actually sit with him and sat with him for about 40 minutes while he cried, and she spoke with him and just held him and was there for him. And he immediately shifted from being this fidgety child that didn't want to, that wouldn't play with a toy for long or wouldn't look at anything and was just constantly upset and just kind of grunting at every single little movement, to, once he awoke from his nap after the 40-minute cry, just sat down with the toy and was curiously looking at it and didn't move for 15 minutes from this thing.
So the only thing that changed
didn't.
was that you didn't try to change him.
We didn't try to change him.
Just allowed him
To do what any child would naturally do, which is cry. And the largest factor for me of, like, shifting out of this was having to realize that, I never received this. So my parents, while very kind and loving in every traditional aspect of the way, also were never taught this and had no clue on how to approach this. And most people don't. Almost nobody does, because it's never taught. Like, we go to school for every other thing in our life except for parenting. Why society did that, I do not know to this day. And everyone,
it's like, good
for
luck
the
out
most
there,
part,
just figure it out.
yeah, and everyone thinks, oh, well, I know the things that I didn't like or that my parents did that I'm never going to do again. And we have this, like, grandiose idea egoically that we can execute on this perfectly and everything's going to be fine and it's going to go really well and you're going to love your child, and oh my gosh, nobody could tell you how to actually raise your child, because that's, no, it's not for them. It's deeply inside of yourself. And while I think there's an aspect of that that sure you can take some truth from, you also can't always trust yourself because you were never taught the perfect way to parent. And if you weren't yourself perfectly parented, that's a myth and a dream.
Yeah.
Even in this process, there's always things that come up, and you'll always never make this perfect. But reducing the amount of times and that they're going to have to go through this process later in life is kind of the point. So being able to then be there and hold space for him to cry and process and rage and go through all of his emotions in the moment instead of letting it build up in his body and get agitated and frustrated by everything is hugely beneficial, but is also internally so difficult to feel comfortable with.
I'm just like asking myself, what are the implications of what you're saying? And if you imagine yourself to be that child who's like crying, doesn't know why it's crying, and it's just feeling, in one case, not fully accepted, in some ways, energetically rejecting the behavior that I'm exhibiting. And it's like in that way, sort of perpetuating the agitation. On the other hand, like if you had a parent that was unconditionally loving, fully accepting, and not trying to fix or change you, that would feel like incredibly nourishing
Yeah.
and like unconditional love. And that's when you would actually feel like able to move the energy as much as it needs to
Mm.
without judgment, and then let it pass naturally.
Yep. Which is what we then spend
We're
countless
taught.
hours and workshops and retreats trying to do in our
I
adult
mean,
lives.
like, let's give the parents credit, and society, whatever conditioning, some credit. We felt like, even me and my parents, and who knows how far back, that the fixing mentality is actually from love. And
Yeah, and the deeper aspect of that when it comes to your shushing or rocking or movement with your child is less of a service to them than it is to yourself, because you need to regulate yourself in those moments too. And by no means am I saying just take your child and let them cry and hold them. Like, there is a lot of nuance to the process. And once you start to feel like your own internal calm in the chaos of that moment, then you're really able to be present with them. And sometimes it is very hard to be present with them. And sometimes, even after you've gotten used to this and you've been doing it, there are times when, like, for example, last night this happened. My son did something and he was had a bunch of built up feelings and reactions and slapped me. And I got sort of shaken by that and it was like, ugh. And so there's a process that we go through, and I went through it with him in the moment. But then he came back like 5 minutes later and did the same thing. And then I snapped and lost my, calm and equanimity. And then I just didn't have the capacity to listen to him and actually be there for him because I was like, so shaken out of this that it takes time for me to circle all the way back around. And so then I have to have my partner, thankfully, had just walked in like shortly after, and I was like, take him, I need a minute. So then I have to go and sit with all of this.
even that just takes an incredible amount of maturity to not react, and just take for yourself what you need to regulate in that moment.
Sure.
Not everyone can say they're on that level.
Oh, and by no means was I perfect. I just grabbed his hands to tell him to please stop. And like,
Probably with some
we're not
intensity,
gonna
like,
we're
this
not
is
gonna
not
hit
okay.
me.
There's a
This
boundary
isn't
here.
there. And that's not the point of this work. And it's very difficult to reparent and train yourself into reacting to these situations in a different way, because your default will always go there. And while I thought my default was very kind and calm, when you're in those very stressed moments, you're like, oh, that is not how I think of reacting to this, because of all the ways that you see society and anyone else react to a child in those moments. And so changing it is a large challenge. And while I feel much better than I did 2 years ago when we started, well, a year and a half ago when we started now, it's forever a learning process.
For sure. It's something I want to touch on that feels actually also profound, that maybe not a whole lot of people speak to, is actually the inner child within. And
Oh, sure.
when you're parenting, it's not only that you're parenting this external being, but your
Yourself.
own inner child. And I got chills. It's in these moments, potentially, when your physical child is crying and it's stirring up something emotional within you, that your own inner child is actually having that process. And maybe this, your child is connecting deeply in resonance on some frequency to that part of you, that, when, heal it to feel it, or feel it to heal it, this concept.
Sure.
We literally have prevented ourselves, I would say majority of society this age, we literally prevent ourselves from fully healing ourselves because we don't allow ourselves to fully feel what needs to move and shift and transform. And when we repress and suppress and reject, and because maybe we're taught that we as men specifically have to be strong and we cannot cry and we can't, like, appear to be weak, that it's very common to actually like suppress that down and to just like stuff it somewhere where it doesn't actually
Sure.
get out of your system until you fully allow yourself to feel it. And then in these moments, it's almost like we have no choice but to fully feel it. And that's the gift that they're actually giving us. And I'm not saying it's like all your fault and that they don't have their own needs in those moments. There's obviously a multitude of reasons why they cry, but one beautiful aspect, and I could say this happened over a period of 5 years for me, and it took kind of a, I'm still on my journey of healing for sure, but like there has been a lot of feeling it within my system, that what I needed to feel to like move and shift and heal and
Right.
release, and to get to a point where I can say I'm more equanimous and can access that superpower. And so it's like, is it really a superpower, or is it just returning home to yourself, returning to like the
To a
normal state
more
of being, which
relaxed
it's so
being.
normalized to be unhealed and easily triggerable in that sensitive kind of state where, yeah, it's an interesting.
Yeah, no, it's definitely important to recognize that you also have to, you're taking care of yourself in the own way, and reparenting to some degree aspects of your life that weren't maybe perfect in the way that you perceive them. And that's a much deeper thing on perception of your circumstances, because there are so many people that would say that, they had perfect childhoods at XYZ, and or others would say everything was great, but even just that lack of presence for like a moment, which is now like more and more the most difficult thing to give a child because of phones and the world we live in. I mean, a watch that blinks and you're like, oh, I have to, oh, somebody's notifying me of something. Like, you have to turn it all off. And if you don't, and you're just there on your phone, like, it's this constant thing of where do you put your attention? When you have attention on your child, they're very there with you and like present and excited about life. And the second you start putting them on sort of on the back burner and scrolling through your phone, we didn't have to really deal with that as kids in our lives. And now we have a whole other thing that we have to consider into the aspect of how we parent and what that's going to look like for them. Because for us, it didn't really affect us necessarily in a deep, profound way, but it is definitely going to be hitting more and more into everyone's psyches. And it's pretty wild how humanity has
Yeah,
moved through all of this.
presence, I think, is one of the most key aspects of parenting that we can ever discuss. And yeah, we live in a world where there's like a multitude of things to devote energy and focused attention to. And obviously, as fathers, providers, protectors, we have to like manage other things. We can't literally
Solely
just
focus on,
be
yeah,
a dad in full presence to our children. Let's be realistic, like,
sure,
okay, so how do we find that balance? And this balance is the mastery, from work, money, to be your presence with your kids, to your presence with your wife, presence with yourself,
yep,
your own needs. Don't forget about yourself. That's four things right there that are like on the same level of importance.
sure.
And is there more than that? Like your
No, that's the
those,
primary
like,
form.
so if you can just balance money, romantic relationship, father parenting relationship, and relationship to yourself, like that is like such a wizard level. not something that everyone can say that they have fully got arrived to, and that it does take tremendous amount of intentionality in each one of those categories. So it's like, wow, we have 24 hours in a day. We have to sleep at least 7 or 8 hours of those days. So we've got what, 17, 18 hours to play with. And if you're super Virgo and on it and practical minded, I mean, theoretically, you can kind of make space for everything. But if you're not extremely devoted and disciplined and intentional, then there's some area that you're neglecting, and then it becomes quickly apparent.
And I'm curious because now you're so much further into your fatherhood journey than I am, but especially in the first like 2 years, my partner has just stopped breastfeeding, and that's like made a huge shift hormonally for her. But even finding the time to connect in any way other than you know with our child and in group dynamics is like almost impossible.
Man,
And that was also not really brought to my attention vaguely, but maybe not in the way that it actually is. And yeah, you have to very quickly shift priorities and like the things that you would expect in a normal relationship, romantic relationship, to oh, there's all of this other stuff happening for her and then for us that we cannot control.
the number one thing that I've neglected and put on the back burner is the relationship with myself, and like not making time to like sufficiently nourish that connection. And then so like number one, I've always prioritized money, the work, the devoting my
Sure,
time to what
it's what
it means to be
society
a
generally
provider.
tells you.
And
Yeah.
so that's exactly what society says that we are, is just the provider. I mean, primarily. And so to live up to that is obviously like huge. But yeah, the goal would hopefully be to get to a place where you can naturally, yeah, let your energy overflow from that state
Mm.
of fullness. And yeah, this is a big topic, this balance thing, and what we will continue
Mm.
to navigate.
I'm curious now, are there any top three things that you would say to any father that is about to become a father
Hmm.
from your perspective and journey so far?
Yeah, just that super honest yet very supportive conversation where I'm informed that this is going to be one of the hardest things that I would ever step into, and that I'm going to be confronted in all the ways and stretched in all the ways and challenged and frustrated in all the ways. But that is actually a key aspect of my growth and accessing my greatest potential. And that whenever you feel like there's a moment that you just can't anymore, you just feel like quitting and you just want to bounce and eject from the, I mean, I've definitely accessed those moments where I'm just like, I fucking can't do this anymore. But that this too shall pass. And that's just like these words have always like given me so much comfort in these moments, to know however hard it is, it's gonna pass, and that you're gonna see that light at the end of the tunnel. And somehow, every time you do that, it gets easier and easier and easier, and the challenges become like less intense and less intense as time goes on.
Mm.
And that there's just so much reward and so much fulfillment and gratification. And this is like the greatest. If I did nothing else in my life worthy of any kind of accolade or sense of accomplishment, this is such a purposeful, dharmic, powerful way to contribute to the world. Usher in this generation that's knocking on the door, and I would say looking for parents and a life that is the least amount of programming, brainwashing, conditioning, trauma, and the most amount of liberation and just freedom to be who they are, fully expressed, and offering their gift to the world, and not pressured to be something else than what they are. That's the greatest gift that any human can give, is just what they came in here to authentically give from the heart. And I just think it's unfortunate in society that children, as they age into the teens and 20s, that they just face so much pressure to live up to some societal expectation of whatever success means. And I would hope to have received some guidance that like this is an opportunity for me to like fulfill this beautiful purpose. um, and not only am I going to grow, but the the child is going to have this tremendous opportunity, and it's going to deepen my love for my wife and access new levels of depth that I've never experienced before, that wouldn't be possible. Um, yeah, there's just uh, probably more that I could share. I mean, I'd love to hear your perspective as well.
Of anyone just stepping into becoming a father, the bigger things that I would have liked to know myself are the realities of how much of a shift it makes to the amount of time that is available to you, which is very little in especially the first couple of months, depending on how you've structured your life and everything. Obviously, everyone does it differently. And if you have multiple caretakers outside of just yourself and your wife, then maybe this looks different for you. But for a standard majority of people, most likely it is just you and your wife, and you are just doing everything you can on your own to take care of this child who's just come into the world. You have no clue what to do when it comes to changing them if you haven't been with a child before, or how to touch them, hold them. And in the beginning, it's incredibly challenging to learn this. You learn very quickly. Thankfully, we're very dynamic beings in that sense. And yeah, the shift of priorities, time for things, and time for yourself is probably one of the things that wasn't spoken to me in any way. And again, depending on your circumstances, maybe a bunch of other things came up during the birth or something else. The the ability for you to sort of have that time available to then be very present with your child as well in those first couple of months, because most of the time people are so frantically trying to do other things and still living life that they forget that, oh wow, this is so temporary and brief. And in the beginning your child needs so much attention. It's not a, you get a break at some point sort of thing. It's a handoff between you and your partner constantly, and then your together time all together. And there's no break. And that shifts as they get older, obviously. And until they're reaching that point, it's it's a lot if you're not used to doing that in your day-to-day life. I think another thing would be the compassion and awareness of how much is changing for your partner as well, because that generally is sometimes spoken about in the context of, sure, all of these things are going to happen, hormones change, et cetera, but really knowing how to show up and be there and help out with the child when she's unable to, or she's unable to pick him up and you have to be there with her, how to navigate all of that and have food prepped and all of the, make sure everyone's getting everything that they need in that moment is huge and is so often forgotten, especially for 9 to 5 fathers that would just go back to work the next day and leave their partner alone with the child. It's nearly impossible to manage that as a with two parents, let alone one. So not having something set up to help your partner in that moment is incredibly challenging. And yeah, I think would have been a really useful thing to know stepping into that space and moment for a majority of people.
Yeah, it's not typical enough, normalized enough for the fathers to take such an active role in the day-to-day care and nurturing of children. And I think it's actually beautiful when I'm seeing so much more these days that fathers are, they have the whole kangaroo pouch on, the kid is
Yeah.
in the front, and they're walking down the street just owning it. And it's like I'm just like asking myself, why did it ever become like the norm for only the mom to be like doing all the fucking leg work, and like they're the stronger ones? Well, actually, we're the stronger ones. We should be helping them with a lot of the more challenging physical things. And found that actually to be one of the most rewarding things, is to have that connection, and actually even getting up at 3 a.m. with the child and soothe. We talked about this. It's like
Sure.
not fixing, but like presence. Um, but yeah, just this rewiring of what a father is, what a mother is. I mean, on the flip side of that, I think it's beautiful when the mom can feel free to, whenever she feels like, you know, be in her more of her masculine, to show up in whatever capacity, and just to know that it doesn't have to be so black and white, you know, as far as the masculine feminine
Mm.
principles, and as it how it is expressed. But that's one thing I hope more fathers can embrace, just that they're more capable than just being a provider, just not than just being a protective, which that's a big thing. I'm just saying, like, you can find again, like, a sense of balance, as far as what that looks like. And maybe there's seasons of life. I've experienced seasons of life where my wife was more of the primary breadwinner, and I was the primary caretaker, like cooking and cleaning and doing more of what that classic stay-at-home mom. But I was the stay-at-home dad. Uh, and then, you know, the next chapter of life, it was flipped, and we just kind of take it one day at a time, and just tuning into like how we can create a harmonious way of life that doesn't put extreme pressure on one or the other, and we show
Mm.
up to the best of our ability. And, you know, maybe there is no manual and no real conversation, because you just figure it out. It's innate, it's instinctive, and you know what to do in the moment, and you do your best.
Yeah, and I think that's you're actually touching on something I was going to bring up based on something you were saying earlier, which was when when I also bring up all of these things around aware parenting and things I found and my partner has found, because she's now certified to teach this and like really dove deep into it. All of these aspects of parenting, when you were saying like you were with your son in presence, like trying to soothe them at night, like that is fine. It has nothing to do with like you are a bad parent or anything, because at the end of the day, we're all doing the best we have with everything we have. And it's nothing about this process is like trying to negate what you've gone through or where you're at in your own journey now. And it really is about how can you, if this resonates in your journey and like you've hit this point where you're like, okay, we've done all these things and like this just something just still doesn't feel right, like, or we can't fix this problem XYZ. It's such a powerful and profound thing to go through this process, but by no means is it easy. And I mean, if
It's a hero's
you're
journey.
it's that it becomes that, because yeah,
And
like
for every man, that's what we all deeply crave, is that ultimate adventure. And then that's what it actually is. It's like, you experience the lows and the valleys, and you go up to the mountaintops, and you look off and you enjoy and celebrate life, and then you might go crashing down to the valley again, and even deeper, and then you come back up. And somehow, like, when you look back in hindsight, it's like you don't feel regret or remorse, maybe for specific
mm,
actions or whatever moments of losing it, but like, for those lows, you actually feel gratitude. You
sure,
don't feel like that they're useless. You feel that they're like expanding you immensely. So
necessary for you to
of
change.
course you're grateful for the highs, and if you can also be grateful for the lows, then actually it's all good. And then you
If you
can
can even
develop this.
recognize the lows, because for some people they won't even see it, and that's pretty wild.
Well, I think it's pretty evident when you're in a low, but I can understand what you're saying. But like, what I would like to really anchor in is this, like, gratitude in advance. So when a low does show up and manifest, then you can be like, no, this is one of those moments that I previously had discovered that was actually extremely beneficial, and I later felt so much gratitude for. So this is one of those moments that I'm going to find gratitude, even though I don't know how this is going to become a good thing, or why this is a good thing, or how this is going to be beneficial. I'm just going to be like, no, this too shall pass, and this is somehow good, and we're going to get through this together. And we always do. It always works out. That mentality for me has been really key to keep going, to stay in devotion, to stay in that, like, I'm not giving up. I'm so committed. I've never been more committed to anything in my life. Like, it's so easy to quit other things, but for this it never was an option. And so
Yeah.
it's like, if it's not an option, then how are you showing up? That's the question we can ask ourselves in those moments. How is this working out for me? And not like, oh, woe is me, and everything is shit. Oh, like what is that hot mountaintop that's coming for me? Look for that ascent and that way out if you're at a rock bottom moment. But thank you for your presence today, bro.
Yeah, definitely. Thank you.
And thanks for showing up as a papa and as a husband, and really appreciate you. You got this.
Thank you as well.
You got this. Yeah, more conversations like this to come.
Cool.